Thank you. Okay. Can everybody read what's written up there? Hi. All right. Welcome. So, Edupalooza 2015. I want to share some stories of exploration and play, specifically a kind of wordplay. So, can everybody read that word? Can you read that word even now? Oh, how cool is that? Okay. So, these are called ambigrams, and that's an ambigram for the word ambigram. And we call this a form of, oh, you can't read that, but you can if you complete the word. So this is a different kind of an ambigram which is symmetric, not on rotation, but on reflection. And it is a playing with ideas. And if you look at that design, that's symmetric left and right. So in these kinds of designs, sense and nonsense sometimes switch places. Love can become hate on reflection. So what we're doing here is playing with ideas of symmetry. Of course, it has to be symmetric. And we are thinking about ideas of aesthetics and elegance and beauty, which is a different kind of a design. And there is sort of kind of a magic in beauty, which is another design, in which case the word magic becomes beauty, of course, sort of magically. And again, we are playing with things like ambiguity. So here's a design. Can people tell me what this reads? Flop, flip, flip, flop. Does it flip and flop between flop and flip? Something like that. Here's another one. Good. Oh, evil. Who saw evil first? Can I have a show of hands? We got to escort them out of here, something like that. This design actually ended up on the show Brain Games. They contacted me and they've included, they have a show on morality, and this episode actually starts with this. And of course, we have to think about, as in everything in life, balance. And that is, again, left like symmetric. So this is the domain where 0, when seen the right way, becomes 1. And as you can imagine, when you're thinking about symmetry and reflection and things that way, this is where math and art sort of come together. And so I've been writing this series of articles. That's what led to this exhibition that Julie mentioned. This is my friend from high school. So we graduated when? It's too far back to even remember. And we used to have a lot of fun with all kinds of things. And he got his PhD from Ohio State in mathematics. And we have been collaborating. So he keeps me honest about the math. I do the graphic part of things. And essentially what we are doing is a kind of visual wordplay with mathematics. So 3 different kinds of sort of designs here. You can see the word wordplay, which is just by itself. Mathematics, which actually is broken up into 2 parts. That's why I have to put it in a circle. So you're looking at all kinds of issues relating to symmetry and math, but trying to come up with solutions which are also elegant and pleasing to the eye, which is when you think about math, when you talk to mathematicians, that's what they also try to do, is come up with solutions that are elegant and beautiful and simple. And so if you look at sort of the geometry of the plane, so this is where I become an educator, there are sort of 4 different kinds of moves that one can make in that space. You have rotation, reflection, translation, and zooming in or scaling. And so here's an example of rotation. Can everybody read that? It's action and reaction. And it reads the same, and you can read it at the top, and you can also read it at the bottom, by the way. So if you read it from left to right at the bottom, it'll read the same as you read it from the top. We can have examples of reflection. So one of the things that we talk a lot about if you're doing motivation is when you should praise a student and when you should blame them for effort or lack of effort or talent and so on and so forth. So of course the word praise has to reflect and become the word blame. So that's an example of what we call a lake reflection. Now reflections, of course, don't only have to be on vertical surfaces. They can also be at angles. So here is one where the word right, when reflected along that dotted line, which is a 45-degree angle, becomes the word angle. And so you end up with a really nice right angle, which reads right angle on reflection. Of course, in mathematics, sometimes you can get caught up in things, and you end up with proofs which are circular, where you start with something that you knew, and you end up proving the same thing. So that's an example of a circular proof. So here's a reflection design which has to be in sort of 3 dimensions in order for you to actually see the word proof in red in the front as well as in the back. What's interesting about this is that if you actually hold a mirror to it, it's still readable, like so. So that's my daughter's iPhone with a mirror kept next to it. So these are examples of reflection symmetries. So you can also have translation symmetries. So for instance, the sine curve is one that, if you translate it over by so much, it'll be symmetric, it'll stay the same. So that's an example of a translation symmetry. And this incidentally also has rotational symmetry, which is a property of the sine curve anyway. The next one is zooming or scaling. So here's an example of the word zoom, which allows you to zoom in. One of the most beautiful parts of mathematics that I've really enjoyed learning about has to do with ideas of self-similarity, which is, if you think about fractals, you think of coastlines, you think of clouds, you think of broccoli, you think of trees. They have this pattern where you scale up or down, sort of a similar kind of pattern remains. So this idea of similarity or self-similarity, of course, is one that we talk about. And a great example of that is the word fractal. And so here's the design for the word fractal, which is a fractal. So you can zoom in forever, and the word fractal would still be visible. So there are other symmetries that we can talk about. So for instance, here is the word triangle written in a way that shows triangular symmetry, the word pentagon written in a way that shows five-fold symmetry, again, properties of those geometric shapes. And of course, some of the most beautiful theorems and ideas in mathematics have to do with infinity. And so that was a word that I really wanted to try and capture in as many different ways that I could. So here's one of my favorite designs. So if you look at the bottom, you can read the word finite, F-I-N-I-T-E, and you can see this design as being the word finite repeated over and over and over again till infinity. But you can also read, if you look at the red words, the one above that, you can also read the word infinite. And the word infinite repeats forever and ever because the I-N becomes the E. So that's the kind of play that you're doing there. So it just goes on forever. Here's another design for the word infinity. And this time you're mapping different parts of the words to itself. So you're getting the word infinity. So as you can see, another design for infinity is this one, which is sort of a different mapping. And this time mapped onto the shape of the symbol that we use for infinity. And that will read the same whichever way you look at it. Other things that you can do if you're into like 3D geometry, for instance, is think of shapes that allow you to see words and letters in them. So here's a shape. And what's interesting about this shape is depending on where you shine light on it, you're going to get different letters. So in this one, if you shine light from the left-hand side, you're going to get the letter A. If you shine it from the right-hand side front, you're going to get the letter B. And from the top or the bottom, you're going to get the letter C, like so. So they actually have built a model of it at the museum, and you can go and have a flashlight and actually see how it's a little game that you can play and to figure out. And essentially what we are trying to do in these articles that we've been writing is to reveal what we call the hidden beauty of mathematics. That very often mathematics becomes this sort of drudge, but there is sort of this artistic element to it. So the word hidden and beauty can sort of speak to each other. The hidden beauty of mathematics. And this kind of work, it's not just math. Can everybody read that word there? Art. It's also true of science. Science is also about patterns and making meaning of things. So we have the word art and science. And hold your breath. Can you read that? All right. How sweet is that? I love that. So this is sort of the work that I've been doing, and it's kind of fun. But I want to share 3 little stories because they also have to do with this technology that we have today, which is the internet. These computers connected with each other, also known as the World Wide Web, which if you think about it, is the World Wide Web. And the World Wide Web exists in this idea of a link, but it's not one link. It's all these devices and computers linked to each other. And so this is the design for the word links, which reads the same whichever way you look at it. And the fact that this internet, I live at a time that we all live at a time where we can create these things and we put it out there in the world has given me so much in return. And I want to share a couple of stories of that, of how this thing called technology sort of can influence the way we think, our cognition. So 3 stories, quickly. These are stories of exploring, this domain of wordplay, which is, I must have spent thousands of hours doing this ever since graduate school. It's been one thing that I've done for no purpose but for sheer pleasure of doing it. And what I've done is just put it out there on the internet, and people find these things and interesting things happen. So first one, how many of you know what palindromes are? So the famous one is when Adam first met Eve. This is the first palindrome. He said, "Madam, I am Adam." So it reads the same. If you read M-A-D-A-M, backwards, it'll read "Madam, I'm Adam." And Eve, of course, not to be outdone, responded, "Eve." So back when I was in grad school, for some whim, I started writing these things called palindromic poems. These were poems which would read the same backwards and forwards. I don't know why I was doing it. I was doing it. It's anything to postpone graduating, I guess. So here's a palindrome for the word race car. I mean, a race car is a palindrome, but I've also designed it so that it becomes an ambigram. But anyway, coming back to palindromes and poetry. So back in 1995, I wrote these poems and I just put it on my website. And wherever I moved, came to MSU, moved servers, this would be in some weird corner of my website. These poems would be there. And I wasn't paying attention to them. I wasn't writing anything more. It was just there. 2010, I get an email from this person. Her name is Sandra Goldford, and she lives in the Baltimore area. And she sent me a one-line email which said, "Thank you so much for your palindromic poems. It's a wonderful resource when I work with women in prison." And I was like, what? So I emailed her back. I said, "What are you talking about?" And it turns out that she's an artist, a novelist, a writer, and she works with women in prison using the arts in order to, rehabilitation through the arts. And when all these women are writing poetry, and she found my website somewhere, found these poems, gave it to them, and they use that structure as a way of writing their poems. And she sent me one of her books, which is a collection of poems by these women. And I said, how could this have ever happened without the internet and so on and so forth, right? It's so reaffirming that something I did for the heck of it on a whim and led to this. The story doesn't end there. In 2011, I got an email from this high school student. That's not his face, by the way. I'm not using his profile. I won't use his name. And he said, for my high school language arts class, I've been asked to interview a poet, and I want to interview you. I said, dude, I'm not a poet. I am a hack. I mess with words. I have fun with it, but I'm not a poet. He said, no, I checked with my teacher. She said it's okay. I said, sure. So he sent me some questions by email, and I replied back, and he said, the reason I liked it because I liked these palindromic poems. So that's me. That's what I would look like if I were in The Simpsons. And so the interview was done. He wrote his paper. That was the end of that. And then time goes by, and then I get an email from him. And he says, oh, by the way, Punya, you might want to know that I wrote a palindromic poem. And I must tell you this, that my palindromic poems are actually quite silly because they are palindromic at the level of the line, not at the level of the word or the letter, which is much easier to write. And what this young man had done, he's now my Facebook friend, by the way, which is kind of cool. What he had done, he had written a poem which is word by word palindromic. So if you read it, it's on my website, you can go look it up. So it's snow falling gently. If you read backwards, it's snow falling gently on stomping feet, so on and so forth. A far better poem than any of the ones that I've ever written. And again, a wonderful thing to happen. Third and final story. I am originally from this state in India called Orissa, and the language over there that's spoken is Oriya. And there is a local Hindu god called Jagannath. And so, of course, I had to make an ambigram about it. So I made this ambigram of the word Oriya, which is my native language. And I kept some of the elements. You can see the statue of Jagannath below. Some of those design elements in there just because. I get an email from somebody who actually knew my dad, and he's a famous poet, painter, drama, so on and so forth, because he found that design and he said, I like it a lot. He was at that point visiting Chicago, which actually makes a beautiful symmetric ambigram. And we sort of emailed a couple of, exchanged a couple of emails, and that was that. Years go by. And then on the 30th of January, please remember the date, it's important, I get an email from him saying, have you ever tried bilingual? And by the way, I think I have a record of somebody who was trying bilingual ambigrams back in November of 1947. November of 1947, if you know your history, or if you don't, I will tell you, it is that India got independence from the British on the 15th of August of 1947. And he had found this in a book by V.P. Sahni, and he sent me a PDF of those pages. And it talked about this young man having fled from Pakistan because of the Hindu-Muslim riots that were happening during partition, and had come to New Delhi, and had gone to meet somebody we all know, Gandhi. And he asked for his autograph, and this is what Gandhi had written. And then Gandhi asked him, do you notice something interesting here? And this guy said, what? He said, I've tried to sign my name that it can be read both in English and in Hindi. So Mohandas Karamchand, MK, so he took the M and the K, and those are the Hindi letters for Ma and Ka. And I'm thinking, think about what's going on at that time. This is like maybe Gandhi's saddest moment, where India and Pakistan have been torn apart into two countries. Even in that time, he's sitting and doodling and playing with these things. I said, how interesting is that? And now I asked you to remember the date. January 30, 1948 was the date that Gandhi was assassinated. The email I got from Mr. J.P. Das was January 30, 2009. I don't believe in coincidences and stuff like that, but hey, it's sweet, right? And I think that is also, how crazy is that as a story, but how typical of Gandhi to continue to play. You know, and I think that's what I take away from that I am connected in some way with this guy who also tried to do ambigrams for whatever reason. I know I'm out of time, so I'll end with a shameless plug. One of my dreams really came true. A bunch of people were involved in making that happen. I can't list them and thank them all. But I have this exhibition. It's called Deep Play, Creativity in Math and Art Through Visual Wordplay. It's at the MSU Museum on till the 30th of June. If you want to see more or find out more about this, just go to deep-play.com, and you can get a link to a lot more of these designs than can be shown over there. With that, I want to thank you. I started with this. Of course, there is a mystery there. Bye. Thank you very much.